Let's get it on. What's going on, everybody? It's Rich. I'm back with another episode of Behind the Counter 2.0, BTC 2.0. I'd like to welcome you guys back again. We've been on a roll with these interviews, and they're not going to stop. My goal is to do 100 creator interviews and just kind of have that as a little body of work for my nerdy self to take a look at and say, oh, I talked to that dude. That's pretty cool. I love comic books. If you're listening to this or watching this, I know you love comic books too. Please feel free to put your recommendations in the comments. You can find me at BTC Rich on Twitter. Tweet me about your comic book love. What do you like? Maybe what you don't like. Mostly what you like. Let's keep it at that. This show is all about a love for comics. This week we have artist Eric Canete, who took time out of his day to talk with me about his work. He's got a crazy fan following online, and he does such great work, guys. Check it out. All right, guys, welcome to the show. Eric Canete. How you doing, Eric?
Doing well. How are you, man?
I can't complain, man. Thank you for doing this so early on West Coast time.
No, this is actually my waking up time. This is my production time, doing my own stuff. So it's perfectly fine. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely, man. It's a pleasure. So, how I think you're a fascinating guy with regards to your work. So,
Yeah.
how did you get started? And how did you amass this rabid fan following on Instagram specifically?
I don't know. I can't predict. I'll answer that second part first, which is I can't predict what Instagram decides to promote. And as far as I don't know, its algorithm is changing all the time, but somehow I caught on and people are following me. But in as far as how I got started, my intent was always to get into comic books. I wasn't good enough. So I kind of got into animation, and that kind of prepared me for doing comics full time. In as far as my attitude and my regimen and obviously my discipline to output work. And I guess it started from there. I started very first job that was notable to anybody is a show called Aeon Flux for MTV and Liquid Television. I worked on that, and I ended up working for Glenn Danzig back when he had an imprint called Verotic. And from there, I kept always going back to animation because at one point, living in Southern California, you had a very high overhead as far as living expenses were concerned. So animation paid the bills, and comics was something that I did for fun.
That's pretty cool. So, and now it's almost like your full circle, I want to say, where it's mostly comic art.
Well, that's what I've been doing recently for my own
Right.
creator-owned project. But I still have a regular 9 to 5 working as a concept artist in video games. So that's why I have to wake up so early, because as soon as a certain hour rolls around in the early morning, I have to switch into work,
Well, that's fascinating too. And you spoke a little bit about discipline that you mentioned. And right off the bat, this is the first time we've talked to each other, and you
Yeah.
seem like you're a very calm guy. So, take me through your work day.
Yeah, sure. I am up around quarter after 4 a.m. every morning, have a little bit of breakfast, and then I start on my creator-owned book called Arcathena, which I'm going to be crowdfunding sometime in early September. I hope you don't mind the plug.
No, absolutely.
And
Please.
then, yeah, and then around 10 o'clock, well, I get to spend a little bit of family time there, starting around maybe 8:30 or so. 10 o'clock rolls around. I do my 9 to 5. Weird how I say 9 to 5, that starts at 10, but I do my work, and then right around 5 p.m., 6 p.m., I go back into family time. Around 9 p.m., whatever it is, if I'm not too exhausted from the day, I squeeze in a little bit more work for my personal stuff. I'm in bed by 10, and I start the whole thing over again 4 o'clock the next morning.
It's a jam-packed day,
It is.
doing this show has really brought to light how hard artists and writers work on a
For
day-to-day
sure.
basis.
For
You
sure.
have
Yeah.
to constantly own your craft.
Yes.
Now, were you always like that, or is this did you pick that up along the way saying, oh, I really have to really work at this?
Yeah, I think it had always come from a space of I don't know what sort of planted this seed of an idea inside of me, but I had always thought that I only have so much time. Like, I would see a lot of my then contemporaries sort of lose track of what they needed to do on their day to day. They would kind of treat it as oh, I'll get to it when I get to it. And I didn't really understand that all that much.
Hmm.
I'd always thought like I only have X amount of time per day, X amount of days per month. I better get good at this while I still have time.
That's a good attitude to approach
It
pretty
is.
much
It
anything.
is.
You know, you got to put the
Yeah.
work in, and there's that I want I can't I'm paraphrasing, but I think it's like you need to the 10,000 hour ideal, where
Yeah.
if you put 10,000 hours into something, you're pretty much an expert at it, you
Yeah,
know. But
yeah, I don't
even
know if
then,
that's ever been like, scientifically proven, but that's a thing that goes around. Although I got to be honest with you, at one point I really did over-index too much on work, and
okay,
I'd missed out on a lot of like, really delicate balance of like work life, So nowadays I really do as much as I possibly can. This is my weekend, so work is
mhm.
the last thing on my mind. I'm only sort of getting a little bit done now while I can, but as soon as officially Saturday rolls around, the last thing on my mind is work, and that's really been sort of the catalyst for long term, if not mental, also physical health.
Yeah, you like it seems like you're good at avoiding burnout, which I feel like a lot of people kind of suffer from,
Sure,
especially now during the pandemic. Like I have artist friends who have just been doing commissions constantly
it
over
makes
the past
sense.
year.
Yeah, yeah,
Now talk to me about your creator-owned project. Please
yeah.
explain it, elaborate. Feel free to take up as much time as you want with it.
Yeah, it's strange because it's like I didn't really have any plans to do it initially. And then I'm always sort of like task and goal oriented, right? So you mentioned the pandemic, and I was just kind of sitting around. What am I going to do with my time? I could, similar to what you just said, continue to do commissions, but at the end of the day, some of those images, well, while artistically helps to grow my craft, doesn't necessarily belong to me. So I
Okay.
sort of started to strategize. I'm like, well, I don't think this is going to end in 2 weeks, like they said. So I better do something to keep myself busy, but also has a long-term value for me, not just artistically and creatively, but then ultimately by way of IP and ownership. So I planned this book out, and I just recently made this analogy that I'd been away from comic books for such a long time. The last thing I did that was somewhat comic book related was a book called Chrononauts 2 with Mark Millar.
Mhm.
But that wasn't really me getting back into comics. I was doing comic book with my friend. I never really thought of it as like, oh, it's going to be in the comic book industry. But so and every time that I dipped my toe back into like reading books, I would do it with a handful of friends, and I didn't really quite recognize the books that were out there. I guess it's safer to say that the books that weren't being made weren't necessarily made for me, right?
Mhm.
And so when I decided to come up with this project, the kernel of it came from a space of like, I kind of want to write a comic book that would appeal to back when I was super hardcore reading comics in the, like the Chris Claremont X-Men days, and
Mhm.
the bombastic nature of like reading Image comics back in the day. That's the kind of stuff that inspired me. And lo and behold, there's actually still an audience for it.
Oh yeah.
And so I started drawing, and I was really trying to capture the feeling of those kinds of stories that weren't necessarily like too profound, too heavy-handed on the on social statements.
Mhm.
Just a fun like people beating each other up, and there just happens to be like cool lasers and aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think at the top level, that's what that was. And then it started to come down to like, okay, so now what's going to be the plot? And I'm not much of a I'm not I don't consider myself like a really well experienced writer. I can move my
Mhm.
way around a plot once a plot is sitting, or once a script is sitting in front of me. I can kind of deconstruct it. But in as far as starting from a blank page, that hasn't really been my expertise. So that was another added challenge, is to go like, okay, what's comprehensive, but not like this isn't going to be profound by any means.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
what makes it seem like I know what I'm talking about? It really is. A part of it is a reaction to me, hanging out in my friends' streams. And like, I remember there's a popular, whatever movie or comic book or series like that they end up talking about. I'm so, uh, and I say this really self-critically, like I'm so on my high horse and arrogant about, oh, it could be just been so much better if they did this and this.
Mhm.
And I really dislike that about myself, because it's like, some people have no idea what it means to make a comic or a movie or like whatever it is, a TV series. And for them to sit back when the product is done and then be so overly critical about it, having no personal experience of what it took to get it in front of a mass or a group of
Mhm.
people, I think it is really a disservice to all the hardworking people that made that thing. So basically, I said like, okay, it's time to shut up about that thing that I'm overly critical about, and put my money where my mouth is.
That's great. And you know what? I agree with a lot of the stuff you said. There's always a market for any area of comics, you know? And
Yeah,
I'm of the mindset where, listen, not everything has to be super weighty
I
and
agree.
profound
I
and
agree.
dour, you know, like you can
Yeah, I
comic
agree.
books are supposed to be fun.
Sure.
Um, you know, and it seems like what you're working on is going to be a fun book. And, you know, like what platform are you going to put it out on? Is it going to be print, digital, Kickstarter, etc.?
Oh yeah, it's going to be crowdfunded, so definitely printed, right? Um, and it's going to be Indiegogo because I like their business model more.
Cool.
It speaks to me as a from a business perspective, which is another completely different hat that I had to put on, not just artist, not
Hmm.
just writer, but now also as a campaign runner and then ultimately as a business person, which I
Hmm.
completely foreign to me as foreign as writing.
Hmm.
And so yeah, and putting it out that way, the one thing that I had keyed to identify was that a lot of campaigns out there, now this doesn't encapsulate all of them, so this is speaking very broadly and generally, a lot of campaigns out there, their fulfillment is way after the fact. And if there's one thing that there's one thing that I challenged myself and the team that's helping to put this thing together, because obviously there's a fulfillment side of this whole endeavor, is to narrow that gap of time between end of campaign into the delivery of the backer's hands. And we've really challenged ourselves. The average, the last time that I had took a look at the numbers, the average of end of campaign to customer was about 6 8 months,
Oh, wow.
which is significant. What we're trying to do is to get it into your hands, into a backer's hands, to as close to 2 months as we can. So about 6 to 8 weeks.
That's a good turnaround time specifically, you know, and like a lot of writers and artists I know just do the Kickstarter route, you know, but
Yeah,
and it's also nuts now, again, doing the show, talking to who I'm talking to, it really does seem like you have to be your your own CEO, your own hype man, you know, like
yeah,
your promos are your own, you know, like how do
yeah.
you and apart from you doing a like a 9 to 5 job, how do you find that process?
How do I find an opportunity? Well, I have a YouTube channel.
Mhm.
Again, let me shill for a bit.
Please,
You
please,
can go
yeah.
to yeah, you can go to youtube.com/Eric Canete. I stream every Monday, and it really is the Monday stream is just about accountability, right?
Mhm.
I'd realized one of the key things that I can establish, independent of just being a writer and and an artist and a creator, I needed to establish that a sort of an equity of trust with an audience, because at
Mhm.
the end of the day, I'm out of the I'm out of the comic book loop in a way. Like I'm out of the sort of the scrutinizing eye of a comic book audience. So I'm not printed by Marvel, I'm not printed by DC, and I'm not printed by the mainstream in any consistency. So I'm basically coming in as a person saying, hey, I'd appreciate your business, here's what I can show you, so that
Mhm.
you know that I'm staying on track. It's an opportunity for me to be accountable, and also have the participation of an audience to come and ask me as many questions, similar to what you're doing now,
Mhm.
about my process, about the plot or anything. The caveat being, hey, if you end up buying into this, some of the stuff that I'm working on could be spoilers. And people have been very kind and accommodating and say, hey, listen, you're not launching until September. I doubt that I'll remember or be able to connect the dots quickly
Hmm.
enough by then to spoil anything for myself. So spoil away. And I've been very lucky on that front. But yeah, so I mean, your question was to how do I maintain some sort of self promotion, and it really has a lot to do with being in the public eye that's under my own steam and power, as
Mhm.
opposed to leveraging an employer's. Like in as far as the mainstream is concerned, whether it be Marvel, DC, or Image.
That's pretty cool. And you know, it's almost like the new era of an artist, you know, being face forward in front of everything that's not backed by an
For
Image, a
sure,
Marvel, or a DC. Um,
sure.
how did you get into the concept art game? You know, again, because I know a lot of people who would love to do concept art, but
Yeah.
they can't make it happen, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you this, man. I don't know. I have this thing that I always say, which is like I fall ass backwards into every job that I've ever gotten.
Sure.
So it has a lot to do with understanding. How I did it was quite lucky, which is, through recommendation and word of mouth, which has
Mhm.
been sort of the my calling card to get into any company that I've ever gotten into, which is I have a friend in there. I inquire. They don't know exactly whether or not I'm a good fit for the job, but if given the opportunity, I always look at it as an opportunity to learn
Mhm.
under somebody else's under as somebody else's like price tag. You know what I mean? Like they're
Mhm.
paying me, it's their budget and they're paying me to learn, right?
Right, right.
So it's out of enthusiasm and wanting to get better at that craft. And again, I always look at it as like I don't know what that field is, so I better go get good at that, right? And
Mhm.
just the tenure of my career, depending on which job I've ever held down, there's a level of like leveling up as far as, oh, I'm further along so that people consider me to be a senior. And that's super humbling, at least in this case, is because I may be the oldest concept artist in this group of people who I'm working with, because they are so significantly more talented than I am. I have an opportunity to learn from them.
Mhm.
So to answer your question of like how did I get into it, quite accidentally, but I never missed a chance to use it as an opportunity to get better.
That's awesome. That's very positive. I
Yeah,
appreciate that. This show is pretty much about like positivity within the artistry of comic books, etc.
very cool.
Um, so what are some of the most fun things you've worked on being like a concept artist, or if you're allowed to talk about?
Yeah, I'm NDA'd like you wouldn't believe.
I'm
So
sure.
that's gonna be the shortest answer is to say like I've done a lot of stuff. The last thing that I did, and people remind me of this all the time whenever I say like, "Oh, this is the first time I've ever been a concept artist for a video
Mm,
game." They're like, "Actually, no, you didn't." Back when they released, oh gosh, Xbox One or whatever that was,
uh-huh.
one of the premier titles that they released right along with it was a game called Killer Instinct, and I had
Mm,
been the concept artist to do, I think, round one, round two, maybe as deep into round three of the character releases that came out
mhm.
for that fighting game. So
Oh, very cool.
yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's unfortunate about the NDAs because you're kind of you're pigeonholed into like, well, I can't talk about it legally, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
for sure.
so when is that Indiegogo project gonna be available for backers?
Yeah, I'm going to launch it in September. Now, the nuance of this
Mm,
particular thing is that, unlike other crowdfunding projects, oftentimes you see like the 120-page or
mhm.
60-page graphic novel, what have you. What I'm trying to do is actually do a 5-issue miniseries. So the
Cool.
concept, if it works, knock on wood,
Mhm,
is to release issue one in September, or at least start the crowdfunding campaign
mhm,
in September, in which there's going to be tiers in there that if you order a specific tier, you are going to be prioritized first and you're going to get into your hands soonest, as opposed to all the other tiers that have little things that are associated with it. Anyway,
mhm,
at the end of that campaign, which I'm thinking to be about 30 days,
mhm.
at the end of that campaign, we fulfill. And as soon as that fulfillment is over, we launch issue two. So
That's
back to
cool.
back to back and so on until all 5 issues have been released and fulfilled.
That's really cool. And then that it'll make more sense once those issues are released. So it'll be like a consistent. You were saying like you want these books to be in people's hands within 2 months.
Correct.
You
Yeah.
know.
And it really has a lot to do with, number one, just establishing, like I said, that trust equity with a
Mhm.
customer base to go like, whoa, this guy delivers, which is apparently a big deal in crowdfunding space. I don't understand why you would crowdfund if you
Mhm.
couldn't deliver. But also I think it has a lot to do with the continuity of the story. You never want people
Mhm.
to be 8 months out since the last time that you put something into their hands and they go like, oh wait, I don't even remember what happened in issue one.
Right. Right. What's your preferred medium of choice? Because I followed your art for quite a while, and it
Cool.
seems like you
Thank you.
go. Well, you're welcome. It seems like you go between hand and digital, like pen and ink and digital, like
Yeah.
pretty frequently. You
Yeah.
know.
I mean, if you had asked me that 10 years, I would have been hands down like traditional, right?
Mhm.
But these days, I kind of switch back and forth depending on what the pipeline needs to look like. So, for instance, the series that I'm working on now called Arc Athena, this mini series,
Mm,
and it's all digital because just the nuance of me having to do all my 9 to 5 stuff on top of being a family man. I can't be chained to the desk to draw
mm.
traditionally. I'd rather have my iPad in my lap and being able to work that way. But back then I had such an allergic reaction to all digital work. The only time it ever gets really sort of it becomes an issue, and especially now because it's a crowd-funded campaign, and it's good food for thought. Is that once you start putting, there's no original art to put into those premier tiers
Mm.
for backers to come in and say, "Hey, I want to own an original piece of art from you." Unfortunately, there isn't one for Arc Athena. I'd have to really manufacture a version of that to accommodate that tier.
Yeah, that's fascinating too. And I think also like you mentioned like 10 years ago, you had a more of a version to digital art because I also think that's because like it was a little bit more different 10 years ago,
Sure.
whereas like now if you have an iPad Pro and Procreate, you can make
Yeah.
the most wonderful things on the planet.
Yeah, it is as close to one as I can get, or at the very least. And here's something somebody asks, whenever somebody asks, like, how do I approach digital work? Because whenever I tried, it looks different from my traditional work, and I think there's sort of a disconnect there. The way I did it for myself, and it may not work for everybody, is that I asked them to shift their expectations when it comes to doing digital work, to assume that digital can do everything that traditional does and vice versa, all sets the exercise up for long-term failure.
Mhm.
The way that I sort of accommodated doing something digital is to say, this isn't going to be like my traditional art. It has to be more. I have to make it more unique to the digital experience and still have it come out to be something that is relatively identifiable as my work.
Yeah, yeah. And then you have a very unique style too.
Yeah,
Um, you
that
know.
helps.
Um, so I'm gonna hit you with a couple more questions and then we'll
Yeah,
wrap it up, man.
right on,
Uh
man.
Eric, what is the sandwich of your dreams? Your favorite
Sandwich of my
sandwich?
dreams.
Yeah.
Holy cow. In recent time, I'm really, really boring, dude. So forgive me. In recent
It's
times,
fine.
anybody who can make a really good BLT, and you wouldn't think that people
Mhm.
can ruin a simple sandwich like that,
Oh, they
but I've
can.
seen it. I've seen it wrecked. Right.
Yeah.
Anytime I run into a place that has a really, really good BLT, I'm a loyal customer until forever.
Oh, forget it. Forget it. That's a
Yeah.
great sandwich. There's a place if you ever get out to Queens, there's a place called French Workshop that's in my
Yeah.
neighborhood and
Yeah.
their BLTs are ridiculous
But you
because
know what I'm
they're
saying? It can get ruined in so many ways, dude.
oh yeah, man.
So
Improper bread, floppy
yeah,
bacon,
yeah, exactly,
you
exactly.
I
Yeah,
like my BLT with maybe a little bit of avocado mushed in
me too.
sometimes, but
Me too.
All
Yeah,
right, Eric, thank you, man. Where can everybody find you?
yeah. You can find me at ericcanete.com, which is my website. While you're there, if you could do me a great, huge favor of signing up for the newsletter in regards to this crowdfunding campaign that I'm doing, it's going to either pop up in about 10-15 seconds, or you can go to the upper right-hand corner and sign up there. You will then be enrolled into a giveaway leading into the campaign for the original bust of the main character of book one. You can find me on Instagram and on Twitter at Eric Canete, EricCanete.
Now, just a little follow up. Are you
Yeah.
taking commissions?
I haven't been able to in the past few months, only
Yeah.
because everything is hyper focused into either getting this thing done or promoting the fact that I am working on something so similar to this, but also in an ancillary way, doing little covers here and there for different publishers so that I can start getting back into the public eye as far as printed work is concerned. So rarely have I done these days commissions, except when my art dealer brings it up that, hey, you're behind on this one. Let's get this off the books.
Awesome, man. Listen, Eric,
Yeah.
I really appreciate having you on. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Huge thanks to Eric for doing that interview. He took the time out of his busy day. You guys heard what he does all day. We got to see a little bit behind, the method to the madness, so as it were, how he balances his work life, his comic book life, being a professional, consummate professional, and just the focus that kind of goes into being an artist. Like If you're a writer, if you're an artist, if you're creative, you know as well as I do, you have to work at it. You got to keep going. You got to make sure your stuff gets better and better and better, because that's how you evolve, right? Let's talk comics, guys. This week, tons of great books came out. We got, Action Comics came out. Joker #2, Rorschach. I know a lot of people are a little sour on the Rorschach stuff, but I'm digging it. Wonder Woman, Lock and Key, The Sandman, Helen Gone #1. Really loved it. Love that book. Joe Hill did such a bang-up job. I can't wait to see where the series goes. Carmen #2 from Gillen March. Oh my God, what a fantastic book. The book is so gorgeous, guys. I can't recommend it enough. Scumbag #7, Rick Remender. The dude is untouchable. He's been untouchable for me for quite some time. I hope I can get him on the show one day. Daredevil 29, continuing Chip Zdarsky's awesome work on the title. But my book of the week, Thor #14. This wraps up the Prey storyline, in which Donald Blake jumps out of his nether realm, otherworldly existence created by Odin and wreaks havoc among the gods and among Asgard, and finally has this confrontation with Odin, Loki, and Thor. Thor's in the Destroyer armor. It's such a good book. This is such a I've mentioned this before. This is such a great post Jason Aaron run from Donny Cates and Nick Klein that it's ridiculous. This book has added so much to the Thor mythos, and it's such a different aspect of Thor. He's the Allfather now, and he's got all these responsibilities that come with it. If I could pick in recent memory, this 5-issue arc, I believe it is, encapsulates a lot of what I love about Thor, what folks love about Thor, and I really recommend it, guys. We also got Guardians #13. Fantastic start to the new team on the book. Iron Man #8, continuing Christopher Caldwell's run on the book. Really digging that too. But again, Thor 14 is my book of the week. Listen, I'm a sucker for mainstream comics, and I'm a sucker for indie comics. If it's a good comic, I will read it, buy it, enjoy it, put it in a little bag and board, and put it in a box to be revisited at some point in the future. I love putting runs together, and I think I've been like that since I was a kid. But, you can't separate the two. A lot of people don't like the mainstream. A lot of people don't like the indie stuff. But guess what? It's all comic books. It's all love. And we should spread that love and send that positivity out to the masses. That being said, thanks for tuning in this week. I'm BTC Rich. You can find me at BTC Rich on Twitter. BTC Rich is the BTC Rich X is the channel you're watching. Please subscribe on YouTube. Gently, politely caress that subscribe button. And we'll be here next week with a fun interview with Tom Schober. Take care, guys. Later.